Alireza Firouzja and Magnus Carlsen are the two finalists of the Chess.com Classic, which is the second leg in the Champions Chess Tour, a series of online events with the greatest players in the chess world participating. Well, here we are in this final, and Alireza Firouzja is down 2-1, and that means that in the final game he is in a must-win situation, playing with the white pieces, and if he wins this game he can force a tiebreak, an Armageddon game. Well, Alireza is trying to play as hard as he can to win this game. If it's gonna happen, we will find out at the end of this video. Just to make sure you are not missing any of the action, make sure to subscribe to this channel to see more coverage of this fantastic event. Thanks for doing that, and here we go. Alireza Firouzja starts the game with the move d4, and we get to see the Queen's Gambit declined, which is what Magnus has been playing a lot in recent years. Knight c3, knight f6, pawn takes d5, e takes d5. So we have an asymmetrical pawn structure. This is a good way to try to play for a win with white. Bishop to g5, pawn to c6, white goes for the move e3. And here bishop f5, bringing out the bishop to f5 is a very nice strategical idea. You wish you can trade off that light squared bishop. If white is going to put its own bishop on d3, you're going to trade it off. And then it's a relatively quiet and boring position. Good chances to play for draw there with black. There are other ways of playing here as well. But what Firouzja does is very interesting. He basically avoids the main lines of opening theory and wants to keep as many pieces as possible on the board. He played here the move knight ge2, so that after the move h6, attacking the bishop goes back to h4, knight bd7, black is also continuing development, and now f3 is played. Very ambitious pawn structure, hoping at some point either to push a pawn move like g4, or maybe even in the center with the move e4. Well, bishop e7 is played here first, so black is the one to have completed its development already. Well, not yet actually, he needs to castle, but that's going to happen very soon. Black is just one move away from castling. Bishop f2 is played here by white, bishop to h7, and now knight g3. So at least the knight doesn't hit the bishop with tempo, but the bishop on h7 is looking great, as well as the knight on g3. Queen b6 played to attack the pawn on b2, and white defends it with the move queen to d2. Castling kingside, so now finally black has completed its development, and after bishop e2 also white is just one move away from bringing its own king into safety. But after rook fe8, here the board is set on fire by the Iranian-French grandmaster. What can white do? Well, of course, castling kingside. That's the move most of us would just have played here. But Firouzja has different ideas and he needs to play for a win. So he opens up the center with the move e4 while his king is still on e1. Black captures it. F takes e4 and we have a critical situation in the center. Are these pawns? They're looking fantastic, but are they really strong? Are they sufficiently supported by the minor pieces? Or is black able to challenge them? Well, Magnus played here this move c5, which is understandable. You want to challenge the pawn and break down the power of these pawns in the center. However, there's also the possibility of playing something like rook 88, centralizing the rook. I think this is a key move, and that's what Magnus should have done. So now the trick is that you are not really able to advance your pawns here yet, and you're preparing to play c5. The reason you're not able to advance your pawns is that if you play something like d5 to attack the queen on b6, there is bishop c5, and black is absolutely fine, ready to take the bishop on f2. Other options include something like e5, but since that rook is on d8, well, as I said, this was not played in the game, but it's a very critical line for the understanding of what is happening. Black can strike here with the move knight takes e5, and the d-pawn is pinned. Even if you try to take on e5, then black has this beautiful shot. Queen takes f2, king takes f2, rook takes d2, and black is absolutely fine here in this case. So let's go back in the game. There followed the move c5 immediately. So no rook 88, but here Firouzja played the move e5, and this knight doesn't have any good square to go to. All white's minor pieces are taking away squares from that knight. So black is forced to sacrifice a piece. Pawn takes d4 was played, and now rather than capturing on f6, because if you do that, there is pawn takes c3, and you're ready to take on d2 if white captures on b6 first. So this is looking absolutely great for black. However, after pawn takes d4, white first takes back with the bishop on d4 to attack the queen while the threat against the knight remains. How should black react? Well, Magnus, fighting for the initiative, moves the bishop away from e7, counters the bishop on d4. If you do take on f6, bishop takes d4, black is doing fantastically. What else can be done? Well, you may think first take on c5 was not played also in the game, but there's knight takes c5. And if you take on f6 the knight, well, the file for the rook has been opened, the bishop is pinned, and you can enter with a knight on d3 with check, as it can count on the support of the bishop on h7. King f1, checkmate on f2 with the queen. Fantastic line. Instead, something like king d1 could still be tried, but after rook 88, you're not even feeling your piece down. It looks like black is just totally destroying the white king here with a discovered check coming next, winning the queen or even more material. So let's go back. Instead, after bishop c5, white played a much better move. Knight a4, attacking the queen, attacking the bishop. Queen goes away to c6. Now you eliminate that bishop first. Knight takes c5, knight takes c5. And of course, Firouzja sees the opportunity here to take on f6. But he may have even considered trading off more pieces, starting with bishop takes c5. He didn't play it, but it looks very good. If you take with the queen, then there is pawn takes f6. And well, still tricky position, but the knight on g3 is a very nice, valuable extra piece for white, supporting the bishop on e2. Was not played in the game, strangely enough, but with shorter time controls, even the best players in the world, they are missing certain subtleties. Well, after knight takes c5, white instead captured immediately on f6, but now the rook comes to d8 and it pins the bishop on d4. And the bishop cannot count on the support of a pawn or a minor piece, or even here the king is also in trouble, and white thought, okay, I need to get the king out of the center, but there's knight to e6, so you're attacking for the second time that bishop on d4, and that piece on d4 cannot be saved at all here. So white played bishop f3, attacking the queen. Queen goes to d6, so now third piece is targeting the bishop. Pawn takes g7. Okay, white accepts that the bishop is lost. Black captures on d4 with check. So the queen exchange is simply unavoidable. Queen takes, knight takes. There's also bishop takes b7. And okay, white is having an extra pawn, which might be worth something. I say actually one pawn. In fact, white is 2 pawns up, but I assume that the pawn on g7 will be captured very soon. In any case, Magnus thought, okay, knight e2, it's a useful move here to exchange the pair of knights, and this rook looks incredibly strong, and very likely another rook will come very soon as well to attack the pawns on the queen side, but there are no immediate threats because that bishop on b7 is protecting its king. The pawn on g2 is still protected by that bishop. However, white can also, of course, save the pawn on b2 by pushing it to b4. Great idea. King takes g7, and white played the move rook f4. Useful move, protecting the pawn. Maybe ideas to attack the pawn on f7 later on, or maybe give a check at some point. Anyway, rook b2 played. And white goes for the move a4. So looking for the opportunity to come forward with the pawns. Ideally, you do create some sort of a passed pawn. If black is ever going to take, you push a6, a7, a8 queen, and that would be decisive. But still, the rook is greatly placed on b2, preventing that b pawn from easily coming forward. Bishop b1 is played here in the game. Remarkable idea, but the point is that Rook wants to come to d1 with check. And if this rook comes back, you can take on f1, after which the pawn on b4 is hanging. So white drops back with the bishop to f3. The pawn on g2 is still defended. The d1 square now also. Black, play the move f5. That's another idea. That the pawn is excellently placed here, supported by this bishop. And now white feels like, okay, there's time to consolidate a position with a move like h3. But here the king comes. And that's also another benefit of having the pawn on f5. The king comes to the center, rook a3. That rook was also boxed in by that bishop on b1. So the rook is looking for an alternative plan to be activated along the third rank. But the king comes in to e5, hits the rook on f4, rook h4, attacking the pawn on h6, bishop e4. So here black apparently is ready to swap bishops. And now you're a pawn down. And normally you're supposed to keep as many pieces on the board as possible. But you want to exchange bishops. Why? Because black needs to attack the king. And the weakest point is the g2 square. So if you can get a rook to g8 to hit the pawn on g2 and eliminate the bishop, you're able to enter with both rooks on the 7th rank. Bishop takes e4 was played, and now f takes e4. So black also does have a passed pawn, but it should be said that the rook on a3 prevents the pawn from coming forward at this moment. Rook h5 check. The king comes to d4, so the king is super active, but prevents the rook from infiltrating. Rook takes h6, capturing the pawn, but the rook is not needing the d-file at all. It goes to g8 anyway to attack that pawn on g2, and you cannot defend it with any of your rooks. White goes g4, but this is super risky move, because now also the 2nd rank has been cleared. And if a rook comes to c1, to the 1st rank for instance, it will be checkmate. So rook c8 is played here. And all of a sudden things are incredibly dangerous. The king cannot count on the support of its own pawns, and the rook needs to come back. But where should the rook go to? Rook d6 is a good idea, trying to come back to d1, so that after something like king e5, you go rook d1, and apparently everything is under control. But in the game, rook f6 was played, rook c1 check, rook f1, and here, big moment in the game. And as always, whenever there's a possibility to exchange pieces, pawns, or anything else, there is this big question. Does it help you, or it favors your opponent, this exchange? Well, here Magnus played this move, rook c2. And, well, there is this very strong threat, because if white is careless, let's say you go g5, there's rook g2. And after king h1, rook h2, king g1, rook bg2 is checkmate. So here we see why this rook is not well placed on f1. But the drawback is this rook is coming to g3 to support the king. The g2 square is covered. There's no check. And the rook is doing brilliantly here, supporting the advance of the g-pawn. Black goes e3, white goes g5. If you ever play e2, the rook comes to e1, and the king is absolutely safe. It's no longer cut off by the rooks. And in fact, the king can simply come to f2, neutralizing the promotion square, and the g-pawn does the job. Black instead played rook f2, but the rook comes to e1, attacking. Pawn on e3. Pawn is not too important. Rook e2 played. Rooks are coming off the board. White goes g6, and the pawn is unstoppable. Check on e1. King g2. Rook e2. King f1. Attacking the rook on e2. Rook f2 check. Rook is protected by the pawn, but king e1. And very soon you're pushing your pawn to g7. So blocking it with your rook on g8 is just completely hopeless. White puts the king on e2, will win the pawn on e3 very soon. So black tried still, rook b2. And after g7, king d3. Don't promote to a queen because of rook b1 with checkmate. Remember this motive, it will be seen in a lot of rook endgames. But that's not good. Instead, white got to escape from this mating idea. There is the possibility to play the move king f1. So now after a check, the king goes away. And after rook to b2, the king comes to f3. And on the next move, you're promoting the g-pawn. Magnus Carlsen resigned here. Firouzja wins and forces the Armageddon. An absolutely incredible game, but things could have gone completely differently here for Firouzja in this game. Because let's go back to that critical moment in which Magnus decided to keep the second rook on the board as well. Normally 2 rooks on the 7th. They are super strong. We know this mating pattern now. But a much better plan here for black would have been instead to trade off 1 pair of rooks. And the idea is that after taking with the king, you're pushing your pawn to e3. And white is 2 pawns up in this endgame, but his king has been cut off. Which means that if you, for instance, push your pawn to g5, the black king is coming over to the other side, g6, king f3, the same mating idea is in the air with rook b1. So the white rook would have to come back, but then there is rook h2, threatening mate from the other side. King g1 can be tried here to attack the rook, but then it's rook g2. And, well, if you put the king in the corner, there is e2, and next there will be king f2, and you can take the pawn on g6 anytime soon. And very soon, black is going to promote the pawn. Black is winning here in this endgame. And even if you would have tried to defend differently, let's say after rook g2, you go with your king to f1. There is e2. This is also a typical idea. King e1, rook g1 check, king d2, and black can take the rook on a1, followed by the promotion of its own pawn. Well, as I said, this all didn't happen, but it was the critical moment in the game, whether to exchange rooks or not. Let me know in the comments, what do you think of this game? And consider subscription to this channel if you do like this video, or if you even like it better, don't forget to consider a small donation, which can be done via my PayPal account, can be found in the description below this video. Thanks for watching, and very soon many more exciting games also from this event. Stay tuned.